we looked at the lesson, we're going, there's not a whole lot to divide up in this lesson. So she goes, why don't you do it? It took me several days to finally say, okay, I think I can. So, but it's already been, it's already been a long week. And added to what will be going on at the end of the week is, she's here, Jimmy and Danielle will be leaving town, and we will have Kaya and Braden. So I've already called in, added support. Reinforcements from good. I was thinking about something to tell you, if you haven't figured out already. I like words. I don't always know how to use them really well, but I like words. I like words with definitions. And Abby was at the house this weekend, and I was going, Abby, I have some really good words I've been thinking about. And one of Abby's favorite words, if you don't know, Abby's my daughter. She just turned 27 this month still. One of her favorite words has always been prestidigitation. She liked that word. She likes what it means, but she likes the fact that she knows how to spell it.
Yeah.
We're not known for being great spellers. So I was going to add one word I think is really cool is recidivism. You know what recidivism means, and you almost always hear it used in terms of prisoners and the return rate of being in prison and going back to prison. I'm assuming, I didn't look it up, that it could be used, a recidivism rate for something else. I mean, athletes returning to the Olympics, I don't know, that could be, I don't know. But anyway, you usually hear it in terms of prisoners. Another one I thought was really cool is obfuscate, or obfuscation, and that's deliberately trying to obscure the truth. And interesting was, we were talking about that word, and Mike kind of got in on the conversation and the definition and stuff, and then in Sunday school Sunday, somebody used that word. We were like, Mike and I looked at each other, we started kind of laughing, and it wasn't a really funny thing. And he's like, well, it's the word you used. We were really excited. So anyway, one more is that in reading, and most of these books, things I get from reading, there's a term, pecuniary remuneration. And yeah, that is a good, and it's a good one, and it's a good thing, and that means being paid for what you've done in money, not bartering or in goods, but being monetarily paid for services rendered. So that came from reading a book, The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, if you've ever, classic, so go read it. One of the first books that was really considered a detective book. Wilkie Collins was a contemporary of Dickens, I believe. We are looking today, and I was telling Diana yesterday, I said it's really a good lesson because it's the heart at rest prayer. And I know that is really what her family needs. Not maybe they can't do it themselves, but for us to pray that they have hearts at rest. And we're moving now from corporate prayer that we've looked at for several weeks, and moving from corporate prayer to personal prayer. And one of the things that we need to understand is that corporate prayer sometimes, although we don't do it that much, is a little bit easier because we're called to it. We do it together. We do it in a group. We are motivated or convicted by one another to pray or to be a part of prayer. But private prayer, in this verse that starts out in Matthew 6, go to your closet, go to that secret room, and pray where no one else can see you. And, so it is something that we do by ourselves, and so nobody's holding us accountable. Nobody knows if we do it. There are several good little passages in here. One from H. McNeil says, the secret of religion is religion in secret. What's the one thing you do when no one else is watching you? How do you act? What are those things that are on your mind when you have some time to yourself, when you can daydream? What are those things that first come? What captures your attention first? And he uses Archbishop William Tyndall's quote. He says, "Religion is what you do with your solitude." And I know he uses that, and I was trying to find the book, and Mike and I couldn't find it. I know we've had it, and we must have passed it on to someone else, and he had a copy in his book, Counterfeit Gods. And so in terms of what is it you do in secret, or what do you do with your solitude, and that way that you spend your time most easily, those tend to become your idols or your gods. And so if you instinctively pray when you have time, you know that your heart is beginning to rest in God, understanding that God is the reward, the ultimate prize of your life, and not other things. And in personal prayer, it says that personal prayer can be carried out in such a way that it orients the believer toward outward focus, kingdom-centered corporate prayer. And as I've just talked about, I looked up the word orient. And it's the definition I think that this most went with is to set right by adjusting to facts or principles. And so personal prayer can be that prayer that makes those adjustments within our lives to lead us into this heart at rest prayer, to lead us into outward focused prayer, and not just a need-based, but a kingdom-centered corporate prayer. And then it has a brief reading of the Lord's Prayer, which we went through so well with Stephen and Eugene. And this is the abbreviated one, but it says the Lord's Prayer sets out for personal prayer two parts: Thy kingdom come, and then Thy will be done. And I've mentioned this book before, and he mentions it in here. Eugene Peterson's Answering God, praying the psalm as tools for prayer. And so he talks about, I'm going to use this a little bit more in depth, and a lot of what I say is not original. It's from him. It's either from Tim Keller or Eugene Peterson. So if you get this book and read it, you can see exactly where I've gotten this from. But there's a rhythm to life, and if you look at it, even in Genesis 1, and it talks about how God spoke, and something came into being, and He saw that it was good, and He named it usually, and then it was evening and morning the first day, and then God spoke, and it was created, and it was good, and it was evening and morning, and it was evening and morning, and evening and morning. And if you know anything about the Jewish religion, they start their Sabbath in the evening. Their holidays start in the evening. I think it's that time when you can't distinguish a black hair from a white hair, when they both look the same lying there, then it is dusk, and that's when their day begins. And I think women sometimes understand rhythm a little bit better than men. Now, not maybe musically, they're great men musicians, but I think a rhythm of life, women understand a little bit better. Once we're adults, we become very cyclical. And Mike, in his premarital counseling or marital counseling, he goes, men, one day is the next, is the same as the next, is the next, is the next. And he goes, women's days are cyclical. We go like this, and we kind of know there's a cycle and there's a rhythm to life. The newborn baby in the womb is in darkness, but the rhythm of the mom's heartbeat is what it hears. And when Abby was a baby, we had, and it's probably, one of those things that we say, oh, it could kill the baby now, but we had this hammock that hung in her crib, and it had a fleece in it, and it just, like, you put the baby in there, and they would just, like, curl up in a ball and just rest, and it had this little pocket, and it had a little monitor you could put in there, and it beat like a heartbeat, and so it vibrated that whole little hammock, and it was great. She slept well in there, and we, but just that rhythm is what we are so, I think, in tune to, or we need to be. The rhythm of breathing. Some people think, oh, that's a yoga thing, and I'm like, well, no, God created us to breathe. We breathe in, we breathe out. let's don't give them something that is good. Truth is truth no matter who claims it. Now they have some other things that are going on that I wouldn't hold to, but there's something about a rhythm of your breathing, of your breath. And I looked some things up, and there are some breathing techniques that you can do that are very healing to you. So there's a certain sense of the rhythm, and he talks about the rhythm of the evening and morning. And if you look at Psalm 4, it's an evening prayer. And then next time we'll look at Psalm 5, but it's a morning prayer. And what happens in this evening prayer is that it's a time to let go. We're conscious, we're submitting ourselves to things to grow, but going to sleep, it's a biological need. Eventually, even if you can't sleep, your body's going to make you sleep. And so in this sense, we're looking at what happens before we sleep. How do we turn things over to the Lord? It says, people who live by faith have always welcomed the evening hour of prayer for disengaging themselves from the discordant, arrhythmic confusion of tongues and sinking into quiet rhythms of God's creating and covenanting words. I think if you've done anything about, if you work out, or this is one of the things I've learned, is your body recoups at night when you sleep. Rest is when the muscle is made, when things heal. And I think it's the same thing with our minds. As we rest, as we learn to turn things over to God in our sleep, that's when we're healed. That's when we're restored. And, there's also a sense of rhythm of poetry. And I think that's one of the things that happens if we read and we pray the Psalms. We have a sense of rhythm, a sense of poetry. And I don't know, I think there are very few people who possibly just love poetry when you were doing it in high school or even college in your literature classes. You're just like, But how many of you remember poems that you memorized when you were in elementary school? And do they still do that? Do they make your children memorize poems? And some do. I mean, we always had to memorize poems, and some of them remember. Some of them maybe weren't so great. I used to hear Joyce Kilmer's and Trees. Yeah. But we remember those poems, and there's something to that. I love this quote from Eugene Peterson. He says, "The purpose of language is not to murder the silence, but to enter it, cautiously and reverently. The poet arranges words in settings of silence, letting the sounds resonate, the meanings vibrate. Silence is not what is left over when there's nothing more to say, but the aspect of time that gives meaning to sound. The poem restores silence to language so that words, organic and living, once again are giving time to pulse and breathe." So as you look at the Psalms as poetry, and a lot of people say they need to be read out loud, so I think you get the rhythm of that easier. So Psalm 4 in this translation, and I wasn't sure what he used, but I never found one that looked exactly like this. But he says, "Answer me when I call to you, O my righteous God. Give me relief from my distress. Be merciful to me and hear my prayer. How long, O men, will you turn my glory into shame? How long will you love delusions and seek false gods? Know that the Lord has set apart the godly for himself. The Lord will hear when I call to him. In your anger, do not sin. When you are on your beds, search your hearts and be silent. Offer right sacrifices and trust in the Lord. Many are asking, who can show us any good? Let the light of your face shine upon us, O Lord. You have filled my heart with greater joy than when the grain and new wine abounds. I will lie down and sleep in peace, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety." And there's a couple little things that happen within this psalm. If you look at starting with verses 2, there's a time of questioning, and there are those who pursue futility. How long, men, will you turn my glory into shame? How long will you love delusions and seek false gods? And then he contrasts that with those who realize providence, know that the Lord has set apart the godly for himself. The Lord will hear when I call to him. And then down in 6, it says, there are those who ask God for what they don't have. Who can show us any good? But then there are those who realize and are overwhelmed with all that he's given them. You fill my heart with greater joy than when the grain and new wine abounds. And in between those two little sections, there are some couplets of, I think they call it couplets of verbs. It says, be angry. It says, no day is perfect. Things go wrong. We need to face them squarely. We don't need to make excuses for them or paper over flaws. So in a sense, there's a time that it's right to be angry. But in your anger, do not sin. What's wrong with the world? There are things that we get angry over, but you know what? The world is God's business. And so don't try to find a time that, all right, here's what I'm going to do. Be angry about them, but don't sin. Remember that you need to give them over to God. When you're on your beds, search your hearts. Get to know yourself again. Not the person that you were all day, that you had to be before everybody, but who's the person that God created you to be? And find that person. And then be silent. There's nothing else that needs to be or can be said. Simply be the person God is gathering you into salvation. So, and then offer right sacrifices. A sacrifice is something placed before God for him to make something of. Once offered, it's in God's hands to do with as he wills, not to be taken back and tried to make correct one more time. I don't know, have you ever been to a birthday party with young children and your child or whoever is really excited to give his present to the birthday person, and as soon as they open it, the giver wants to take it back and say, this is how you do it, this is what you do it, instead of giving the gift and let it be that person's. And I think that's a lot of times what we try to do, even when we give ourselves to God. We're going, oh, wait, I can do this a little bit better. I can perfect this a little bit more. And yet, as we offer ourselves living sacrifices to God, we're his to do it as he wills. When he wills, what he wills. And so, as we do that, then it's trust in the Lord. Because change involves forgiveness and sanctification. A sinful life is what we offer, and a holy life is what we receive. And I think, as we look at just the last verse of that psalm, and he says, I lie down in peace, I sleep in peace, because I know that everything I have, that everything that I need is yours, and I can trust in you. Sleep will overtake us, but are we able to sleep? I know as moms, Mike, sometimes something would happen, our kids would not be home yet, or he goes, and he would go to bed and go to sleep. And he goes, what is my staying up and staying awake how is that going to help anything? And as moms, I think we're a little bit more, we have a tendency more to be awake, to fret, to worry, but we know if things are in God's hands, he'll wake us if we need to be woken. I can say that now because I don't have anybody coming home, just learning to drive or, but there have been those times, even when they haven't lived here, that in our home, that you're in turmoil over, particularly our children, I think, or a loved one. It could be a parent or, even a good friend. But we lay those things in God's hands and rest. And I love this, what he said from Jonathan Edwards at the end. He wrote a sermon, and the outline was, our bad things will turn out for good. Our good things can never be taken away from us, and the best things are yet to come. So we're amazed at our access to God, And it's not until we put our temporal needs in perspective with the glory given and guaranteed that we will be able to ask God for things without getting ourselves deeper into worry and self-pity. And I found a poem, and I'm just going to read it once. And I read it several times yesterday, and the more I read it, the more I liked it. And it's written by George Herbert, who I believe was in the late 1700s, early 1800s. But he was a pastor. And so this is his poem called Evensong. It says, "Blessed be the God of love, who gave me eyes and light and power this day, both to be busy and to play, but much more blessed be God above, who gave me sight alone, which to himself he did deny. For when he sees my ways I die, but I have got his Son, and he hath none. What have I brought thee home for this thy love? Have I discharged the debt which this day's favor did beget? I ran, but all I brought was foam. Thy diet, care, and cost do end in bubbles, balls of wind to thee whom I have crossed, but balls of wildfire to my troubled mind. Yet still thou goest on, and now with darkness closest weary eyes, saying to man, it does suffice, henceforth repose, your work is done. Thus in thy ebony box thou dost enclose us till the day, put our amendment in our way, and give new wheels to our disordered clocks. I muse, which shows more love, the day or night. That is the gale, this the harbor, that is the walk, and this the arbor, or that is the garden, and this the grove. My God, thou art all love. No one poor minute scapes thy breast, but brings a favor from above, and in this love, more than in bed, I rest." So let's